Hi, I'm Scott Humphrey, CEO of the World Floor Covering Association, and this is Leadership Live. The information I share with you in these weekly segments comes from a plethora of locations. Sometimes it's a presentation I've given in the past. Oftentimes it's from one of the books that I read. It's the reason I kind of have this as a backdrop. And sometimes it comes from my interactions and suggestions from people like yourself. So if you have an idea for Leadership Live, please email me at shumphrey@wfca.org, because oftentimes I'll use those for one of these segments. This week's segment comes from a lunch that I had this week where I was interacting with a friend of mine, Chris Simmerow, and we were talking about how we train our people. And he made the statement that he has no problem training his people, but he has trouble taking the time to invest in himself. I share that same challenge. Sometimes we get so busy in our leadership role that we forget that we have to continue to sharpen the axe. I know you've heard the story of the two lumberjacks, one of them very physically fit and another quite frail. And the frail lumberjack challenges the physically fit lumberjack to a tree chopping contest to see who can chop down the most trees in a given day using solely their axe. Well, the one who is physically fit goes nonstop, tree after tree after tree, and periodically the one who is frail takes a break. Now, most people would assume that he was doing nothing more than resting his body. In fact, that's what the physically fit one thought. But at the end of the day, the one who had taken the breaks, the frail lumberjack, had cut down about twice as many trees as the one who was physically fit. And when he asked him, how did you do that? He said, well, not only was I resting my body in those breaks, but I was sharpening my axe. I find many leaders forget to take the time to sharpen their axe, to invest in themselves through going to a seminar, through listening to podcasts, through listening to audiobooks, or from reading one of the books like I have behind me. We have to sharpen our axe. It reminded me of the story of a gentleman who was one of the best in his trade. He was born in the late 1800s, but functioned in his trade in the early 1900s, and counted among his customer base the elite of the elite. In fact, he was friends with Prince Edward. He was friends with Harry Houdini and many others. It became a mark of honor to have done business with this gentleman. His name was Arthur Berry. And Arthur Berry to this day is considered the greatest jewel thief in American history. That's right, he was a jewel thief. He had his first robbery when he was 15 years old. He made about $100, but he robbed a store and didn't think it was enough. And he decided from that point forward, he would only rob the elite and he would only get jewelry because he could take the jewels out and sell them and he would just take the gold and discard it. Well, it became a mark of honor to say that you were robbed by Arthur Berry. He had amazing skill sets. He was careful with his preparation. He anticipated all probabilities, and he was a great conversationalist. In fact, he would walk into a lawn party, having not been invited, and he would just begin interacting with the people who obviously loved to talk about all the things that they had. And that became fodder for his future exploits. Arthur Berry was amazing at his trade. He was finally arrested, and he spent 21 years in prison. After he was let out, he became an exemplary human being. He passed away in 1981, but he lived a full life, and many of the people that knew him in his later years never knew what he had done for an occupation in his early years when he was considered the best of the best. And then Life magazine ran a story on him where they talked about what he had done and showed him where he was today, but talked about how good he had been at what he did earlier. He rarely took a weapon with him. He was very gentlemanly. In fact, he was known as the gentleman thief. And he would go in and steal from people, but let them know he was there and tell them to be careful and not to try to reach out to anybody while he was there. In fact, one lady, he put a robe over her and gave her a cigarette. She could watch him while he was robbing her. And that was just the way he did what he did. One day later in life, somebody walked up to Arthur Berry and said, do you remember who you stole the most from? Because he had some amazing exploits. It's imagined that today that during his career, he robbed from $5 to $10 million worth of jewelry from people. So when asked the question, who did you steal the most from? Arthur Berry, without hesitation, said, I stole the most from Arthur Berry. He said, I could have done so much with my life. I could have invested my life in many people and in some trade and had something that contributed to society. But instead, I stole the most from myself. When you as a leader refuse to invest in yourself, refuse to take the time to get better at what you do, you steal from yourself. You've heard me use the adage before, and I'm not sure it's always accurate, that you can't lead someone where you haven't been, because truthfully, leaders take risks, and when they take those risks, they're leading where they haven't been. So let me make that statement a different way. You're much better when you lead from knowledge than when you lead from ignorance. Arthur Berry stole the most from himself. But to be a true leader, invest in yourself, sharpen your axe, because as you invest in yourself, not only are you helping you as a leader, but you're inspiring those who look to you for leadership. So go out there, sharpen your axe, and lead.